All righty, let's get going. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to American Baitworks Live, Freedom Tackle Edition. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. First and foremost, I will apologize for a little bit of the spotty internet connection. I'm out on the shores of beautiful Big Rito, and unfortunately, some big storms have been coming through. So it seems like the audio's good. My video's not great, but it's we'll do our best, guys, and we do apologize if we do have any interruptions. It's been kind of nasty weather out there, but we definitely have an amazing show. Lenny, you are a popular guy. We're already over 25 people jumping on real quick through different stages. Hey, Carl. Hey, Jeff. We already got people tuning in. So, guys, this is going to be an amazing show. Lenny has become a friend over the years. We've fit quite a few tournaments over, I'd say, probably the last 7-8 years against each other. But I think he deserves a formal intro because the guy doesn't know how to put fish in the boat. So I know you're not like to show off, but it's impressive when you have 3 Renegade Classics. You've won Team of the Year twice. I think you have 6 wins at the Renegade level. 2015 Canadian Open champion on Kingston Canadian Open champion. Is that 37 Renegade top 10s, Lenny?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and then multiple clubby wins. So, guys, it's a real treat. We got somebody I consider an all-around amazing angler, but definitely a great jig guy on board. So, welcome to ABW Live, Lenny.
Thank you very much, Jason. Glad to be here.
So tonight we have a special show, guys, because bass season is here in Ontario, Quebec, and the rest of Canada. Big largemouth season is here. The grass is growing. It's been hot, and I think for most bass anglers, flipping, pitching a jig is probably one of the best ways to fish. So maybe, Lenny, before we even get going on this live, can you just kind of give us a little bit of your jig history, where it all started for you? And, I know you've been fishing this area for over 30 years, but I'll let you kind of break it down for us a bit. Sure.
I blame actually 2 anglers that I competed against probably 30, 32 years ago. They were dominating the tournament season or scene in the Kingston area way back in the Kingston Bass days. It's a little club event. We used to get 30, 40, 50 boat fields in there, and they're dominating. And I watched them for 2 or 3 years and what they're doing, and not necessarily what they're doing it with, but it drove me to figure out how to catch big bass in weed beds, and they were doing it to a T. And I just put my head down and got the boat out every night after work, picked up a flipping jig and never put it down, and didn't bring anything else in the boat with me, just a flipping jig. And here I am today. I mean, it's definitely my favorite way of catching big largemouth for sure. I blame those 2 anglers hands down.
Well, that's all right. I think they probably steered you in the right, definitely in the right path. So, just even for myself, just getting used to the Rito chain, really, having a handful of days out, and I've really come to learn. We have a Renegade tournament coming up this weekend over here on Newborough. You just see the milfoil everywhere in the grass, and I can understand guys fishing from this area really needing to become a jig fisherman, and that's why I think this live is so important. Because Lenny, as long as I've known you, an open book, basically everything up to waypoints. So anybody wanted to learn, this is definitely the place to go. So let's fire it up. Maybe, Lenny, you can present us really the 4 main types of fixed jigs that exist on the market right now.
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty excited. Anybody that knows me really well about in and around the jig area or scene, I've been pretty stuck to one type of jig, 2 or 3 different colors of that jig, and like I started using the new Freedom jigs opening day this year, and I made a point to really stick with them and give them a really honest try. They were new out this year. Obviously, I never got a chance to use them prior to the season because there was bass season in zone 20, but I never got out to fish largemouth too much. So opening day, I made a point of really giving an honest effort into the new Freedom jigs. And like I said, if anybody knows me, I've been using the same jig for 30 plus years, and with a lot of success and a lot of confidence, which is definitely key in anything you fish with. But I never picked that jig up. I've been on the water 4 or 5 days now and flipped milfoil every one of those days. and I've yet to pick up that jig I've been using for 30 years. And like I said, if anybody knows me well, that's very rare for me to not pick up that jig. And the reason is because the new Freedom FT jigs, they're flipping jig. I started using it open end day, and right from the get-go, I was unbelievably impressed with them. Hookup ratio is like second to none. The fall rate on them, the fall, like majority of the fish hit on the fall with any flipping technique, whether it be flipping or pitching, majority of the fish hit on the fall. And to me, I think that's key in a flipping jig. So I never look back. I haven't picked up my go-to jig yet this year. I got 2 of them tied on, and they never left my rod box. That's how excited I am about these new jigs. But as for your question, Freedom has what they call a structure jig, which is pretty much an all-round jig. You can throw it anywhere. You can throw it in the weeds. You can throw it in the wood, docks, rock. It's pretty much an all-round jig. Also, they have...
Sorry, Lenny, it's really that line tie on the structure jig that really allows it to really come through the rest and
yes,
the structure down there to so it's like you said, it's a real versatile jig.
Yes, a very versatile jig. The structure jig, between the structure and the flipping jig, actually look fairly similar. The head on the structure jig is a little bit wider. Plus, it's got a horizontal line tie, which allows you can swim it, you can drop it, you can do multiple things with the thing. Like I said, it's got a little bit bigger flat side on it, so you can skip it under docks, skip it through trees, whatever. A little bit easier than you can with the other jigs. And then the flipping jig has got a vertical line tie and more of a cone shaped head to it, a little bit of flat side to it. So when it hits bottom, it's got a little bit of a, it stands up a little bit. Yeah, so more of a cone head. So it actually comes through the weeds a lot nicer. It comes through very, very nice. And trust me, at my age and the amount of times I've been flipping a jig, something that comes through the weed is definitely beneficial for me because my body is beat up bad, like really bad from flipping jigs.
So you should just stick smallmouth, Lenny. You'll be all right, man.
Yeah, well, this is going to be the year of the smallmouth for sure, I think. But I'm going to throw a few buckets in there just to surprise a few people. But
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I want to. Also, they come out with the football head, which is a little bit smaller profile of a bait, a little bit smaller of a hook. It's more of a outside the weed type of jig. You can bounce it down rock, bounce it down shorelines, flip it into docks and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's a little bit more of a compact bait. I think it's going to be a great bait when the fish are a little bit finicky, just a little smaller profile. Yeah, and football head, and it's got a bit of a wobble to it if you want to swim it, or as it falls, it wobbles a little bit, and as you retrieve, it's got that little bit of a wobble because of the football head. And then also they come out with a swim jig, which I'm very excited to use. I haven't thrown a whole lot of swim jigs. The last couple of years I've been playing around with them a little bit. And it's an amazing bait. It's big hook on it, great solid hook. The line tie is amazing. The weed guards it's everything you need. Everything you need right there. I'm gonna play with them just to swimming across the top of the weed and maybe through some of the thinner weed on the outside edges or inside edges. Looking really forward to giving that a go this weekend. Actually, I played with a little bit in pre-fish, and it was hooking up very well for both smallmouth and largemouth.
Well, if I could just add to that, Lenny. So we kind of jumped into it. I think both of us are really excited about these new products coming out. But really, so everybody kind of gets the idea. Freedom has always been a company. And again, guys, I do apologize for my video connection. I know it's kind of chunky right now, but I hope the audio is good for everybody. But really, we're really excited about it because Freedom's always been a company based on innovation, and they took a product that works great. So a lot of companies have great flip jigs, and they basically improved it, and they've done a ton of improvements, like just the bait keeper, that machine bait keeper, that metal bait keeper that's right on the shank of the hook. I mean, it's, you guys, the days of crazy boot are over. Gluing the strands of your skirt together or continuously ripping the baits. I mean, that's the thing in the past. So Lenny, I don't know if you can pull one up, guys can see it. You put it right up to your camera, and we'll have all this stuff for you guys on our ABW pages as well. Come up a little higher there, Lenny. There we go. So you can see those metal spikes coming off of the actual shank of the hook. Yeah, you see it perfectly there, Lenny. And those just pin the plastic to the actual head of the jig. And something else that's really neat about the Freedom Fix jigs is now the weights are printed onto the actual head. So now there's no more questioning on, is it a half or a 3/8 or a 3/4? No, it's right there. And I find that just an absolutely amazing feature for those jigs. So Lenny's gonna probably pull one up there and show you with the bait sitting on it. It really sits. Guys, if anybody has questions throughout this live, I mean, we're gonna get into the nitty gritty of jig fishing shortly, but guys, there's no dumb questions. You know, feel free to ask them, put them in messages in the comments, and we will go ahead and answer them for sure. So please feel free. We got Sean saying, "What's up?" Bobby saying, "I need these." So. Guys, they're starting to flood into a lot of our local retailers here in Ontario and into Quebec. Obviously, if you guys are looking for a specific retailer, an online retailer, feel free to send our Facebook pages a message, or myself, or even Lenny, and we'll line you guys up in the right direction. So maybe we actually get into the nitty gritty behind. What's up, Ron? Let's get into the nitty gritty behind actual the seasons of jig fishing. So. Like you said, opening season, you're throwing a jig. I have a gut feeling you're throwing a jig in October as well. So is there a progression to jig fishing, whether size or color? Explain to us, you know, how the jig fishing progresses. And this is purely from my knowledge again to this weekend. So feel free to give as much details as possible. Not just around, but how does it progress from spring into fall?
Definitely early season. I'm definitely not as aggressive with the jig, and saying that I go based on the size, the profile, and how I work the jig. I definitely early season it's a lot more subtle. You like, for instance, the Paca claw, the Paca chunk, the net bait Paca chunk. I like using that as a jig trailer, but generally not right off the hop in the early season because it has a lot of water displacement, and I just find that you need something a little bit more subtle early season because there's still a little bit of post-spawn funk in the fish. It's just, and I go a little bit lighter. I'll go 3/8 or ½ ounce a lot of times early in the season. If they're willing to hit a 3/4, by all means, I'll do it because that means I'm in the water that much more, cover that much more water. But early season, I try to scale it down a little bit. A lot of times I'll just trim the skirt a little closer to the hook, just scale the bait down just a little bit. And a little
bit of a smaller offering.
Yes, a little bit smaller of an offering for sure. And as the season progresses, as the water temperature warms up, and you tell what the mood of the fish, I'll start increasing weight, I'll increase size, some bulk to it, and I'll get more aggressive with it. And that carries on right through to the fall. Right through the fall for sure. And dirty water, I'll go with definitely that Paca or chunk is amazing because it's got a ton of water displacement, which you want to do in dirty water.
Well, we got a question here, Lenny. Before we go any further, got a question from Bob asking, would you use the structure jig for ledge fishing? Now, I know we don't do a ton of ledge fishing up here because we're not necessarily on reservoirs, but I know you've done a bit of fishing down south, Lenny. Is that the jig you would use, or would you go more to football?
I would definitely go football and structure for sure. Definitely the two. Yeah. Especially if there's a lot of rock or, like you said, ledges and stuff like that, definitely football or structure. Either one of the two will work well, hands down.
Perfect. Now, when it comes to, we're going to jump around a little bit all over the place, guys. I've put together a bunch of questions for Lenny on stuff that I've always wanted to know, and I'm sure that's that's the majority of anglers. So we're going to jump to rods, and the reason I want to ask rods is because you have, from what I've heard, you kind of have two schools of thought. You'll have guys that'll really use a really heavy, really extra fast rod, like a pool cue style rod. And then you'll have other anglers that'll, really want to have a little bit of a bend to that rod to be able to, not necessarily snap the jig out of the fish's mouth. So where do you stand, and what rods do you use?
Me personally, I start with something that feels comfortable in my hand, and the actual weight of the rod, not necessarily the action, but the weight of the rod. I need something that feels comfortable in my hand because I won't put that rod down for 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever. It's in my arms the entire day. So fatigue is a big thing. So I want a light rod. I also like a fast tip. I don't go with like a 7, 8, 7, 10, 7, 11 flipping sticks, like you said, the big pole cues. I can't do it. I just, my body just can't handle it throughout the whole day. Also, I tie straight braid right from my reel right to my jig. So I don't need that heavy meat stick. I don't need it. I want something with a little bit of give, just because you don't want to rip the holes. You don't want to rip a hole in the face of the fish. Better chance of losing the fish, all that kind of stuff. Because I use braid, I use that type of rod. Like I use a 7.5. Here's 7.5 Halo KS2 Elite. That is definitely my rod of choice. As soon as I picked it up last year, like I was very, very impressed. Super impressed. Like crazy sensitive, but it's got that fast tip. I like you said, I like that bend with braid. Now, if I was fishing a lot of fluorocarbon, I understand why people were going to go to something a little bit heavier like that. 710 extra heavy or 710 heavy type of thing. I understand why they want to do that because there is stretch in the fluorocarbon. So that would make up for it.
So let me ask you this, Len. This is a question for myself. I've been watching a lot of videos. You know, pretty much any angler tries to learn as much as they possibly can. And you'll notice it's kind of like a 50-50 split. You have a lot of guys who will flip with straight braid, and I'm like you, I'll put 50-pound braid on my flip stick. And then you'll see a lot of the guys down south will actually flip with 20 or 25-pound fluorocarbon. Is there a reason they're doing it a little bit more down south than we're doing it up here? Is it because of the different types of bodies of water? Is it a fishing pressure thing? What is it in your opinion?
I think it has a lot to do with both confidence in their mind and fishing pressure. Definitely fishing pressure. I always looked at a flipping jig as more of a reaction bait rather than something that looks like something in the water. I really don't know what looks like a flipping jig in the water. Some people say crawfish, all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen a crayfish look like a flipping jig. But majority of the fish I target are for reaction bite rather than a hungry bite. So I seriously think that braided line, I've yet to, like the odd time I'll throw fluorocarbon, but I don't see much of a difference in my mind. But like you said, down south, I think a lot of fishing pressure, tons of fishing pressure. And I guess if you're in gin clear water, it could make a difference. Although I flip with straight braid in the St. Lawrence River, and I don't think you can get any clearer than that.
And I would argue some of the shallow water in the Rideau chain is probably just as close as the St. Lawrence River as well, right? And you're having,
absolutely,
you're having some success. So we got a great question here from Carl. So kind of, being not a seasoned jig fisherman, what to use, where, and when? Now, this question we can go on for half an hour, but maybe a quick rundown of when would you flip, when would you football, when would you structure, and when would you swim jig? A swim jig's a question I'm going to have in there as well, because when you use a bladed jig style or a swim jig, I've always been kind of questioning that. So I'll let you kind of answer it because I know you've played with them all.
Sure. Anything to do with thick grass, thick, deep grass, I don't think I'd venture away from the flipping jig or the structure jig. The structure jig I think could do just as well, although it's got a bigger flat side to it, so it might glide a little bit more. Whereas the flipping jig is more of a cone shape, so it's going to drop straight down, which is what you want. Anytime a jig glides in a heavy weed bed, it actually runs into the weed rather than dropping vertically beside it. And I think that can make a big difference. It might be a false bottom. You may think you're on bottom, but it's up against the weed stalk or something like that. You really want your jig to fall straight down. But the structure jig definitely has its purpose too. Like I said, it's an all-around jig. You can throw it in the wood. You can throw it on the dock, your docks, bounce it down rocks. You can flip it in the weed. Although I would probably, if anything to do with weed, I'd probably throw in more of a thinner outside edge or an inside edge or something like that rather than the really heavy jump. That's why it's important to have 2 or 3 different kinds. Football head, I personally, I throw a lot of football heads and I'll bounce them down rock edges or like the heavy, like even mud type thing. But most of the time it's down like a rock edge or a hard bottom. I'll bounce it rather than like pitch it way out and bounce it back towards the boat. Deep water, 17, 18, 19, 20 feet of water, outside weed lines, stuff like that. I think they have their time and place. And because of this one actually in particular, it's a smaller profile. I would throw it around a lot of weed edges where the chances of catching smallmouth and largemouth are available. Like that, this jig will pick them up because it is a smaller profile. It's a nice jig, actually. Very nice.
It's a gorgeous jig to football.
Yeah.
And as for the swim jig, for myself, I throw them more in the fall, so I'm excited for fall fishing on those footballs on some of these largemouth lakes. They eat those pretty good. So. Oh
yeah, definitely. And for the swim jig, I throw that over top of weed beds that are down. You know, you might be in 10 feet of water. The weed only comes up 6 or 7 feet. And I'll chuck it across the top of them and just tick the weeds, just tick them. And actually, I want to be in contact with those weeds a lot because that usually triggers the bite. You know, you hit a piece of weed, you rip it through, you let it settle in pockets, swim it across the top. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that big time this weekend, actually.
Oh yeah, sounds good. We got another. So that's a great question, Carl. Thanks for that. We got Tim Robinson asking us, "What is your favorite jig set up for skipping under dock?" So basically, weight, and then you go maybe line, and then obviously rod.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of it, to be honest with you. I prefer the weed beds myself, but when I do, I like something like with that structure jig. It's got that big flat top to it, which allows you to skip a lot better. Okay. It's just like skipping a rock across the water. It's got to be a flat rock to work properly. So there's a prime example. But yeah, and I'll generally throw it on a medium heavy rod. I find with a little bit more whip, I can get that big skipping across the top of the water with more control and more accuracy rather than the heavy action rod. So.
Sorry about that, Lenny. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback here. The internet connection is not great when you're talking, so give me 1 second.
Okay.
Jump in here. This just kicked in all of a sudden, starting to give us issues here. Were you hearing the crackle in the background as you were talking?
No.
Okay. Well, if anybody's hearing the crackle, so good. If it's on my end, like I said, I apologize again the connection. If it's on my end, it's a big deal. I just want to make sure not everybody's hearing the crackles. So we got a great question here. I'll jump this one. I should probably jump Carolyn's question because she's saying, Lenny, you're huge fans, and we want to know who you think is going to win the game tonight. But one thing we know, Carolyn, is it's not going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs, that's for sure. Who do you think is going to win the game tonight, Lenny?
Yeah, you're broken up quite a bit, Jason.
Okay, give me 1 second here, Lenny. I really do apologize. We're trying to get everything in order here, and now I'm a little better. Am I still breaking up?
You're breaking up bad.
Let me put the question up for you here, and then I'm going to disconnect and let you answer. And,
sure.
I'm going to give you a topic. You can go from there. So when a bass gets buried himself in the middle foot, you try and force him out or let him work himself out?
I didn't get that. Can you? There we go. When you get a bass that's buried himself in the milfoil, do you try to horse him or let him work himself out? That's a tough one. It's I definitely, you got to keep the pressure on. I prefer to try to horse them out, only because if you let them go out on their own, they generally take you in a little bit deeper. The biggest thing is not letting them do that, and you just got to work on your timing of your hook set to prevent that to happen. I see it quite a bit with new people that are flipping jigs. They just don't realize they have that bass on until it's a little bit too late, and that's just time. It just takes time to figure that out. I've tried to. A lot of people have asked me, how do you know when there's a fish on your jig? And other than seeing your line tick or feeling weight or actually feel them bite, there's other. I don't know what it is. It's a sixth sense or something like that. I just set the hook. Um, it's hard to explain. I think.
But if I could just jump in, Lenny, I know exactly what you're talking about because you just, it's that feeling where you think you got something, but nothing actually happened. Something happened, but on a micro level where you just knew something was happening, right?
Absolutely, and I can't explain that. I could give you all kinds of explanations, but I don't know if any of them are right. It's just something about it that makes you set the hook. In regards to all that, that's what you have to try to figure out, and that takes time. And by figuring that out, you're actually setting the hook and getting that fish's head turned so he doesn't bear you into the weed. So it's all a timing thing. So, but yeah, if they do bury me, I try to horse them out for sure.
So I don't know if you saw this question. First of all, Lenny, is my connection a little bit better?
It's a little bit better, yeah.
Okay. So Carolyn's asking who you think is going to win the game today. I made an awesome joke that nobody heard. My joke is definitely not the Maple Leafs, but anyways.
I think the Jays are going to win.
There we go. So we got Brian Doyle checking in saying, hey guys, we got Brian saying he can attest to the tips of Lenny. They were great, amazing jigs and great results. Same with the Halo rods. Thanks, Brian. We got Nick Gendron saying, what's up, Lenny J? Keith Cormier called the Jig Man. You got Samuel Longo asking, what kind of trick would you use on a football for smallmouth fisheries? That is a great question.
Can you? Oh, there, okay. Put it on the screen. I probably you can mix that up. Probably want to stay with a smaller profile, like any kind of a craw trailer. I mean, the pack chunk works really, really well with it, and they have you can scale them down a little bit too if it's just a little bit too big. You want to try to keep the jig somewhat compact because smallmouth are notorious for not taking the whole bait. A lot of the times they'll just take the trailer off the end. So you want to keep it somewhat compact. That might be just a little bit too big right now. Yeah, just anything with some action. And you have to feel what the smallmouth want to. I find sometimes like even a little swim bait off the end of it's just enough. Just a little bit of vibration from that tail. That might be just enough.
I've noticed the net bait kick and bee and mini kick and is a great trailer. It's got exactly that. To me is, it just displays water. It's small. It's a great trailer.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you just got to piss them off.
Sure. Bobby asking, what would you use in a medium river system? So I'm not sure what he means, but probably a system with not too much current. Would you probably stick with what, like 3 ounce to half ounce if the grass wasn't too thick?
Oh, you're gone.
You lost me. Can you see the question?
Yes. Okay. Again now. Yeah. All depends actually what kind of targets you got, what kind of habitat you're fishing. Medium river system. I would think they're all very, very good. Like St. Lawrence River, I fish a lot of current there, and I don't fish it any different than I would if it was a non-current situation. Yeah, but I would think you're probably going to be swimming a lot of jigs there too. I don't know how high the weed growth is, and that's a tough question because until you see what you're actually fishing, it's hard to answer.
Am I coming in clear now, Lenny?
Yes, you are now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have a question for you. St. Lawrence River versus lakes. How do you see jig fishing a big river versus a lake?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
You hear me now?
Yeah, you're broken up a bit though.
Yeah, so a big river versus a lake, how do you see jig fishing? What's the differences?
To be honest with you, I look for this exact same stuff. It's just use current as your friend. The bigger fish like the current. So I try to find the same type of structure as close to the current as I possibly can.
Sounds good. Got a question here. I'll show up in a second. Got a bunch of questions here, Lenny.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. More so probably the football jig would be the jig I throw for smallmouth, because it is a little bit more of a compact bait. Largemouth have no problem hitting biggest flipping jig you could possibly throw at them, but sometimes those smallmouth, they need something a little bit more finesse, and I think that football jig is the way to go. Definitely, I'm looking forward to giving that a go on actually Lake St. Francis, dragging that in some of Jason's waters.
Got a question. We got a comment from John Martin. Hook sets are free.
Yes, and there's that's probably one of the best pieces of advice that I would give someone that's flipping a jig. If you feel that there's something wrong, and this is again just to start jig fishing, feel what a flipping jig does with nothing hitting it. This is the best way to start flipping a jig. Feel what it does, how long it takes to get to bottom. Feel what it does without a fish on. Any of that changes, set the hook. And John hit the nail on the head. Hook sets are free. For every one you miss, you just learn something. For every fish you catch, you learn something again. So like set the hook, set the hook, set the hook. Sometimes it hurts when you don't have a fish on, but yeah, set the hook, and eventually it's all going to start to click. You say, oh, I felt something different. I set the hook and there was a fish there. It's like, okay, I just learned something. And then just try to picture what it's doing down there, all that kind of stuff. So hook sets are free.
Very true. Am I a little better now, my connection-wise? I don't want to be
Yes. No, you're good.
cutting out like crazy. Okay. We have somebody reaching out from Tupelo, Mississippi, saying they still support Mississippi companies. So that's great. American Baitworks head office is in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. So that's great to hear, guys. Do you have is there anything that comes to mind that made you become a better jig fisherman? Was it just time in the water? Did anything happen? You don't have to give away any specific secret that you found in the grass, but did something click at some point, or it was purely time on the water?
Can you repeat that, Jason?
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. This is it's killing me over here with this cutting out. We got a question from Jeff Compton. I'll pass him up here. Maybe you can read the question and Lenny on cutting out.
Yep. Lenny, are you using the highest speed reel possible, something in the 8s or even higher, or do you think it matters being able to power the fish out of the weeds? I find 7, I'm a 7-to-1 kind of ratio guy. Anything more than that, I think you lose power. You still got to maintain power. Back when I started flipping a jig, I think it was like a 4.2 or 4.5-to-1, 5-to-1 gear ratios, and it was tough. And that was back in the days we were using monofilament. It's just like fishing with a slinky. But I generally don't go any higher than 7-to-1, because I feel everything above that you're losing power, you're losing momentum, you're losing that advantage.
Okay. Give me a second here, Lenny. Got another question for you here.
What would be the best tip for a beginner jig angler? I would say the best tip I can give you is what I just mentioned, is feel what your jig is doing without a bite, without a fish. Time it, see how long it takes to get to bottom. Anything changes. If it's 2 seconds to get to bottom and it stops 1 second into its flight, set the hook, because there's a fish there. They don't have hands, and the jigs just don't stop in mid water column. Figure out what weed feels like. Figure out what bottom feels like. Anything changes. Anything whatsoever changes. And like John said, set the hook. It's free. It's free. And eventually everything comes together. It's that puzzle that just starts getting put together. And it takes a long time to get on a jig. It really does. It's not something you can pick up in a day. The hardest part about jig fishing is knowing when you have that fish on. And it just takes time. It takes time.
Seems to be a lot of fluoro questions.
Yeah. I'm a straight braid guy. I've yet to see a situation where I have to throw fluorocarbon. Yes, I've tried it, and I just not comfortable with it. The jigs to me just don't feel right. I feel that stretch in that line, even if it's a fluoro leader, like 3 foot fluoro leader. I feel that stretch. It doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I'm connected to that jig like I should be. I braid straight too, hands down. But if I was going to throw a fluoro, I don't think I'd throw it anything less than 20. It all depends, I guess, what you're throwing it and what kind of structure you're throwing it into. But it's hard for me to answer that because I'm straight braid too. I think sometimes we give the fish to
man himself.
Pardon me.
There you go. Sorry, guys. Trying to get this going here. There we go. So what do you use to determine, and what size jig to use? What's your barometer for that?
I like to start a day with 3/4 ounce because if they're willing to hit it, I like being in the water every second of every minute. I'll start with a 3/4 ounce jig right off the hop, and I'll determine what the bite's like. Jeff and I we work together a lot in the boat right off the hop. He might go with a 1/2 ounce. I'll go with 3/4, or vice versa, and we'll see and we compare notes. How the fish are biting. You hook up a fish on 3/4 ounce and it's got it way down in its yap. I'm going to keep throwing it because they're on it. But if it's just barely hooked, I may scale down to a 1/2 ounce so that the fish get a little bit more of a chance to look at it and eat it. You almost have to let the fish determine what size to use. It sounds like I'm avoiding the question, but really, ultimately, every question, you could use that answer. Let the fish determine that. So just because you're confident with them, it doesn't mean the fish are gonna want it either. So
Keith saying can't beat the braid.
yeah, absolutely. I see more hits than I'll ever feel flipping a jig, hands down. 90% of the fish I catch or that I see hit, it's because of that line tick, or very rarely do you feel a fish hit. Very rarely, because you should be fishing a jig on a slack line.
So before you answer the next question, do you reel up and set the hook, or do you set the hook the moment you feel something?
I set the hook instantly. I don't care if I got 3 feet of slack line. I'll set the hook on the top of my hook set, and I'm pretty avid of keeping my hand on that reel every second. So I'm reeling instantly as well, so they don't get tangled up in the weeds and caught up and roll me over. So
Maxim's asking, what's the perfect weather to flip a jig?
Every weather possible. Absolutely.
So I got a question. I hope I'm still clear, because it seems like I'm clear for the last little while. But are you a little frustrated that the smallmouth bite in this area has become a little more predominant than that jig largemouth bite? Do you adapt? Is it something that frustrates you a bit? I can see a smile in there, but I can imagine a flipper, would want to just win on big buckets, right?
I don't know if frustrated is the right word. It is what it is. Yes, I would much rather flip a jig. I got a lot more confidence doing that than fishing smallmouth, especially in the inland lakes. Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence, give me smallmouth all day. It's not a problem, but they fish different in the inland lakes. But yeah, I would much rather flip a jig, hands down. Newborough last year, I mean, we had almost 21 pounds of largemouth, and we were third. We got beat out by 2 smallmouth bags, but I guess it was frustrating, but man, I had fun.
I'm sure you did. We got Jeff Compton, and Like to read a comment. So slackline hook set like Gerald Swindle and not a real hook set like Brian Thrift.
Yeah, I don't know. I've watched and like I think I know what Jeff was talking about because I seen a little YouTube clip on that, and I don't know. I just think sometimes if the fish are right on the chew, you can get away with reeling down and setting the hook. But I don't know. Like that's a big chunk of lead, great big hook and weed guard sticking the fish inside their mouth. A lot of times they don't hang on to it that long. Like reeling down and setting the hook, I think a lot of them are spitting it out long before you get a chance to set the hook. So like you said, fish don't have hands, so it's in their mouth when you know you got a fish on. So there's no reel down for me. I don't do it.
I would say that's probably one of the best tips you've given today is the hook set tip, because I think a lot of people wait to get a big, powerful hook set.
Yeah.
You know,
I think the key is catching up to that fish. Even if you got a hook in it on the top of your hook set, is catching up to it. That's the hardest part. I see a lot of people get handcuffed. Once the rod's way up here, they get the hook in them, but they forget the reel. Because they're way up here, they're kind of handcuffed. So, and I fished with John years ago, and he used to call me Bill Dance because that's the way Bill Dance always set the hook. He was way up here and then starts the reel. So,
well, funny you put that. Look at his comment.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yep.
We used to call Lenny Bill Dance back in the day because of the high hook set.
Yep. But back in those days, we were using 20-pound Stren clear blue monofilament. Like back in those days, like braid wasn't even around. Neither was fluorocarbon. So you had no choice. Like I said, it was fishing. It's like fishing with a slinky. The amount of stretch. So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
I got a good question here from Keith Cormier, and I know you're going to like this one. One jig color to fish for the rest of your life. What color and why?
Well, it's that's a tough one because I mean I have a confidence color, but I strongly believe that it's not so much the color as it is presentation and profile. So, but if you want to go to my confidence bait, hematoma. Midnight hematoma. It's got everything in it. It's got some purple. It's got some blue. It's got majority of it's black. I think it's got all the avenues covered in that regard. Other than more of a natural bait like pumpkins or brown blacks and stuff like that. But it's a tough one. I've yet to see those colors not work anywhere. They work everywhere. So
clear water, dark water, it's all good.
I think it's presentation. Again, it's more of a reaction bite than it is a feeding bite. So I think it's maybe color does make a difference in a lot of locations, but I strongly believe presentation and profile is more important.
So here's a question, and I hope I'm still coming in relatively clear here, but what about like when it comes to different vegetation, are you mostly a milfoil guy? Do you look for other types of grass to flip into, like those cabbage grass or even certain bodies of water? Or are you primarily always looking for the milf?
I definitely look for milfoil the most. Some bodies of water just don't have any, or if it is there, it's not high enough or thick enough or whatever. But cabbage a little bit. Some of that stringy grass, it's really tough to fish a jig in. Although opening day, the body of water is on, there is quite a bit of stringy grass, and the flipping jig actually came through it very, very well.
Good.
Very, very surprised on how well it came through. The jig I've been using for years would never come through it anywhere near as good as these. I think it's all in the head design. So, but yeah, definitely milfoil is my favorite, hands down.
Now, while we're on the subject of milfoil, milfoil has all different stages. You know, it can be red and green. It could be matted out. It could be baby milfoil. Without giving us anything, you know, that you've worked hard at kind of unlocking over the years. You know, what is something you want to look for in the milfoil to feeling that the bass will be in there?
2 words: red tops.
Guys, that's a huge tip because that's years of experience to kind of dial that in, right?
It's the most mature weed. It's been there the longest. Fish usually generally bond themselves, we'll call it, to weed that's been there the longest, matured. It's got its full canopy. Yeah, red tops. Hands down, it's mature weed.
So when you have, would you flip a jig into like milfoil that's matted out as well, or would you then go to some sort of a punching presentation when you get there?
No, definitely, like especially these jigs because they got such a cone head to them. You can punch. I was punching with this jig yesterday, probably for an hour and a half, and it goes through that junk like nobody's business. Nobody's business. It works really well. Yeah, I don't flipping jig hands down in that stuff, hands down.
We got a great question from Dennis Desjardins. Do you use rattles in your jigs?
I do, and I'm not. I don't. I think it's more of a confidence thing for me. I know a lot of people that do very, very well with flipping jigs without rattles. Me personally, I like it. There is the odd day where I leave the jig down for quite a while and just shake. And I'm not sure if they saw it or they hear it or whatever, or maybe a mixture of both, but they slam it as well. So I think every day has its moments where maybe maybe the rattle scares them away, but I've always used rattles. So I guess that's my answer. Yeah, I like rattles.
Perfect.
I think it's a confidence thing.
We all know confidence is the #1 tool in fishing, right? If you're not confident in what you're doing, put it down, change it, do something else.
Yeah.
Just got a great question. So do you ever run a contrasting color trail in relation to the skirt? You know, will you throw a green pumpkin and a black egg or similar shades, or just contrast sometimes make a difference, or is it just confidence?
I definitely sometimes I will make a contrast change and something right off the wall sometimes. Just crazy, especially in a pressured body of water. Like there's a few lakes north of Kingston here, and Jeff knows which one I'm talking about. That gets a lot of pressure, a lot of club tournament pressure, and you know it as well, Jason. But it's starting to get hammered pretty good. So there's a typical example where I'll just throw a white trailer on a black jig. Like how much more contrast can you get? So and sometimes it makes a difference. It's just, and I think it's just something that the fish don't see very often, or it gives them something to target, something crazy.
Just catch his eye, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Keith asking us a smallmouth question here, saying, when fishing smallmouth, what situations would you, I'm assuming like a football jig versus a tube jig? That's a good question because they do have similar tail as to the bait, but they are completely different, of course.
A lot of times I'll drag, say, like the football jig in a current situation. As you know, Jason, I know you do a lot of it as well. Throw football heads and stuff like that. But I find they don't hang up near as much as a tube jig. Tube jig, you're retying like quite often, whereas a football jig, it comes through the cover a lot better.
It just rolls over nice, right?
Yes, it does for sure. Whereas a tube jig, I mean, it does get tangled up. You're retying a lot more. And if I'm looking for that big bite, the football jig, for some reason, it targets more big fish. I think generally as a percentage, you get more big fish than you do average fish with them. And I'm not out in tournaments, I'm not out to catch 2.5 pounders. If I get 5 bites a day and they're the right 5, that's all I care. So.
Well, and just to add to your point, Keith, you know, look at the fishing pressure too. If you're fishing a body of water where everybody's throwing tubes, then a football jig with a skirt is definitely something different for the fish to look at as well.
Absolutely.
The question hopefully sounds like I'm coming in a little bit clearer now. At least that doesn't seem like I'm cutting out as much. But when you're fishing the jig in weeds, do you pitch it, leave it, drop, wait a little bit, reel, and rethrow, or do you try to bounce it back through the weeds? So do you stroke it up and down through the grass, or do you just kind of pitch in, rattle, jig it, and
Yeah, I'll go right back to I'm looking for a reaction bite rather than a feeding bite. It's funny, we were fishing a club tournament 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the tournament anglers I fish against quite often, he's from New York State, he fishes our events, and he sat there and watched me for 5 or 6 minutes flipping a jig, and he actually timed how many flips per minute I was getting. He was just blown away, and he came to me, and after the tournament was over, he said, do you realize you flip about 6 or 7 times, up to 8 times per minute? Excuse me. And I'm like, I don't keep track, but yeah, it's a good stat, I guess. So I'm looking for aggressive fish. I could care less for those ones that are, kind of sitting back, and yeah, the odd time, if you feel that the bite is a little bit slow, I'll slow down a bit. But I'm very, very aggressive with the jig, very aggressive. And I think sometimes if you leave it too long in front of their face, they won't eat it, because really it doesn't look like a whole lot. So I think if you give them too good of a look at it, they won't bite it. So I want that reaction bite. I want them to say, oh, what's that? I better eat it. And then figure out, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. So that's the bite I look for.
Nice. Well, I figure, I think I think that the jig displaces a lot of water, right? So when it comes through the grass, I think it just, sends off a vibration that there's, some distress come through into their kitchen, right? Or into their dining room table.
Yeah.
We got Phil saying, love your frogs. I'm assuming he's speaking about scum frogs. They won a couple of big tournaments. That's awesome. Right. Phil. Raphael saying green pumpkin tube on a football jig is insane. So I'm assuming on just a football jig head. So that's cool. To be honest, guys, not that we're talking smallmouth tube jig fish, but those 2.5 set the hooks with the small set the hook tubes with a small football head in there. Oh my goodness, those catch big smallmouth.
Yes, they do.
Denny Desjardins asked another great question. Hard to find, but if you had the choice between pork rind, what would you choose? Pork rind and plastic?
I prefer plastic only because I've lost way too many fish with pork because it rolls over top of the hook, and you cannot drive a hook through that pork. I don't care how good a hook it is or how hard your hook set is. You can't pull that hook through the pork and into the fish's mouth. I've lost way too many fish with pork. I fished with it years and years ago, and with the plastic trailers that are out now, I have no reason to go back to pork. I think sometimes you'll get more bites with pork, but if I can't get a hook into the fish, they're no good to me. It just rolls over the hook way too much. And
it's got that hard. They kind of got that hard back to it.
It has a lot to do with how aggressive I fish the jig, and I think that's why the pork rolls over my hook more often than plastics would. So,
got a great comment by Keith Cormier calling you Lenny Brower instead of Denny Brower. Keith, I think Lenny would give Denny Brower a run for his money on jig fishing as it stands right now. So
I don't know about that, but I did watch a ton of his videos when I started fishing a jig. I really did. He has a lot of really good points, and I've repeated a lot of what he said years ago in the videos I watched of him.
Well, it's interesting. I remember one of the most memorable Bassmaster wins was him winning on Lake Champlain fishing a jig in Missisquoi Bay.
Yes.
When it was flooded all the way into the cane. So, and he was fishing that jig deep into the cover. So, before we shut it down, guys, I think my reception is kind of good for now. Does anybody else have any questions? We got a few minutes left. Before we shut it down, Lenny, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. Lenny's pretty much been an open book as usual tonight. So just to reiterate, guys, So Freedom does have those 4 new fixed jigs. The response so far on both sides of the border has been absolutely incredible. The retailers that have been carrying them have been selling in repeats. We've been moving through them like crazy. So we appreciate all your guys' support. I mean, these are, in my opinion, and from what Lenny's saying, probably in his opinion, well, some of, if not the best flip jigs out there, and the price point is amazing on them. So,
yeah, just on a quick note, Jason, like I started with the interview off, or the show off, I've been using that one jig, and most people in this area for sure know which jig that is, for years, and years and years. John and I, actually John Martin, we started using these, it's got to be 30, 32, 33 years ago now, and we haven't looked back. For me to say that I'm unbelievably excited about these jigs says something, because that jig I've been using for years has put a ton of trophies, a ton of money in my pocket, boats, team of the years, tournament wins, top 10s, Renegade, hands down. And for me to leave it in a rod box, I'm not just saying that because, Freedom Tackle has been really good to me. I'm saying that because these are an amazing jig, like crazy amazing. I'm super excited. I called Mike and Nick and Robert, the 3 owners of Freedom Tackle, that night after opening day, and they could hear the excitement in my voice that I was unbelievably impressed with these jigs. And I am 100% honest when I say these will be my jigs of choice from now on. I can't say that I'll never pull out that other jig ever again, but these are my go-to. When I have 8 jig rods tied up, 6 of them are going to have these jigs on the end of them. I guarantee it. Guarantee it. I'll show anybody at any point in time when they look through my boat. That's how confident I am with these jigs.
It's funny. What I got from that is when you said you had 8 jig rods tied up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You can see the man's serious about jig fishing. So we'll finish it off with one last question from Jeff, which I think is a great question, saying, are you adding any kind of scent to the jig, or are you relying purely on the action of the jig and the plastic tray behind it?
I generally don't add a lot of scent. If the fish are to the point where I have to either dead stick a jig or work it super slow, I will definitely add a scent. But generally, the way I work them, I don't think they have even a chance to smell it, because I'm in and out of that hole in the weed bed so fast that I'd probably pull it away from fish or whatever. But I don't generally use it too much. But if somebody's just starting out jig fishing, and they're not detecting that bite right away, I would advise to use some scent, because it gives you that added little bit of time to get a hook into that fish before they spit it. So, and saying that, anybody that's listening right now, keep your eyes and ears tuned to American Baitworks for a bit of a scent thing that's coming out here in the near future.
Special stuff coming down the pipe, guys.
I'm telling you, it is scientifically proven, and science doesn't lie, and I guarantee you are going to like it, hands down.
Awesome. Well, guys, you know what? We had one more comment and one more question, and then we'll shut it down. Jeff saying that's some pretty strong words from Lenny, because he's tried every single jig out there, from custom jigs to stuff off the rack. So he says he's going to be looking to try those Freedom jigs. Guys, seriously, go to your favorite retailer. If they're not carrying them, they can order from us so easily. Ask them for those jigs, or if you have a bunch of retailers online, we got great retailers already carrying the complete jig lineup. So if you are looking to get your hands on them, and visit the American Baitworks page, you can see the color selections, the different jigs. You can really get a full breakdown from there. Last question of the night, Lenny, and I'll let you roll. Sam, what kind of setup would you use to fish a football jig for smallmouth bass?
I would probably stick with a bait casting outfit, only because you want to be able to drive a hook into them. A good stout spinning rod will do the same thing. Halo's actually got a 7.4 KS2 Elite medium action. I think because of the length of the rod, I think that'd be a really good rod as well, just to initially you want to get a good hook into them, and I think sometimes with smallmouth you want a spinning outfit that's got a nice smooth drag as well. Sometimes that's beneficial as well. But although with the football head and the right line, you can, on a bait casting outfit, you can probably winch them in pretty good. But yeah, definitely you want something with a bit of a stout action to the rod, and line choice is kind of is up to yourself for water conditions, clarity, and all that kind of stuff. But
awesome. Well, Lenny, I think we'll shut it down. Again, guys, I do apologize. We're in a little bit. I'm in a little bit of a spotty reception area. We tried to half an hour of trying to find the right reception. So hopefully we pulled it together. I do apologize. I know it's a little bit difficult to look at somebody cutting in and out the whole time. But Lenny did a great job. Thanks so much. Take it easy with that jig bite this weekend if you can. You can get it back on Sunday. I'm good with that. And guys, don't hesitate. Reach out to us. Feel free. Ask questions. Lenny and I were open books, and visit your local retailer and ask them for the Freedom Jigs. They're going to be pretty much everywhere you can buy bass here for 2021 going into 2022. So thanks a lot, Lenny.
Hey, just one quick comment. Another tip, and I mentioned it shortly in the interview, but basically new people to flipping jigs in weed beds. I touched base on it a little bit. You want your jig to fall on a slack line every time, and 1,000,000% focus on your line as it's dropping down, as your jig's dropping through the water. That's the number one detection of a bite. Watch your line. Watch where it touches the surface. Look for that tiniest little twitch in your line, or your line stopping prematurely before it gets to bottom. That's probably one of the most important tips I can give somebody to start out with a jig. Watch that line. And like I said, they do not have hands. So if your jig stops prematurely or that twitch in your line, jam them. And act like it's the last fish you'll ever catch in your life. Reel it in. Get it. So
if you're new to jig fishing, guys, go do it. The bite is amazing. I think that's probably what's hooked Lenny for the last 33 years. So.
Hands down.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Lenny. We'll see you on the weekend, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the live, and you guys can rewatch this live at any time on any of the American Paperwork stages. And stay tuned. There's a bunch of stuff coming down the line. Thanks, Lenny.
Yeah. Take care, buddy.